This is the iPhone as it existed in early 2007, not that long ago, brand new and gorgeous. And what is Steve Jobs, the guy who 30 years earlier gave us the PC and this architecture, have to say about the iPhone? He says, we define everything that is on the phone. You don't want it to be like a PC. The last 3 apps end up being a problem, and now it doesn't work anymore. That's why this is more like an iPod, the classic appliance that doesn't even have a way to change the battery. When the battery stops working, you throw away the iPhone or iPod and buy a new one. That's the new Apple, which is totally opposite from the old Apple, in part because it's aware of changing consumer expectations. So that was the first bid on the iPhone. But then the Dan Bricklin and Bob Frankstons of the world were like, wait a minute, we want to write VisiCalc and get that onto the phone, or whatever the next VisiCalc's going to be. Are you saying that the only things on the phone will be written by Apple? Apple's answer was, you're right, we should have a so-called software development kit. This is not a real Newsweek cover. I can't remember what a real Newsweek cover looks like, but this was somebody so excited about the iPhone opening up to third-party code in 2008 that they designed this fake Newsweek cover. And now anybody could code for the iPhone, and you could get an explosion of apps with one interesting asterisk. And that asterisk is all the apps get funneled through the App Store. There's only one store to get apps, whether they are free or for a fee, and that is Apple's store, which is completely different from the off-the-shelf software movement that the Apple originally gave rise to. And what that meant was they won't let certain things into the store. Illegal, malicious, privacy, porn, bandwidth hog, and my favorite, unforeseen. We can't allow anything unforeseen in the App Store. So soon after it was introduced, people were writing apps, some of them goofy and free. Here's one that didn't like President George W. Bush, so they did an app called Freedom Time that simply counted down the days, hours, minutes, and seconds, quote, till the end of an error. All right, whatever, it's like, haha. Rejected from the App Store, not allowed. And the guy actually wrote to Steve Jobs, who occasionally in that day would write back to the odd email or two. And he just writes and he says, come on, like why can't my app be in your App Store? Steve Jobs actually writes him back. And he says, even though I'm basically a Democrat, this will be offensive to roughly half our customers. What's the point? All right, now you've got a gatekeeper, both for security purposes, but also that is now in a position for its own reasons or under order or suasion from a relevant regulator to affect what can happen through the technology. And I say that is a sea change for reasons that I hope I'm explaining are totally understandable, but it is a sea change as significant as the 1977 open revolution, and one that we're starting to understand there's a cybersecurity problem, but we are not understanding as much, as broadly, the ramifications of the solutions that we are rushing to adopt. And it's not just, say, the Apple iPhone. It's true with something like a Facebook Connect button. If your client is running a web property and people don't want to have to do the 1996 thing of establishing an account and having a password specific to that site, you know how annoying it is as a user to have to do that. There's just that Connect with Facebook button. And even if you're not really an active Facebook user, if you have a Facebook account, boom, you're in. But it does mean that Facebook gets to say when that button is and isn't used. And you can use it pretty permissively until Facebook doesn't like you anymore. So here's a company called LOL Apps that made a game called Critter Island that desperately wants you to pay attention to it. There's something on this island for you. We don't know what. And this game got an astonishing number of users, 150 million, with their monthly actives hovering around 12 million. There's up almost 15 million. Oops, wait a minute, they have no users. Facebook pulled the plug. I think due to privacy violations that Facebook thought LOL Apps was committing with the users, and Facebook might well have been right. I'm just saying this chart should be very much on the mind of any firm wanting to interpose a third party between it and its customers. It should be part of any business plan of any startup that says, we're going to get a ton of users and we're going to do it on Facebook, or we're going to do it through Twitter usage and stuff, because as soon as you do it, this becomes one of, for a startup, several existential threats that the firm might face. I don't know how many of you use like quantified self sort of stuff. Basis Watch is one of them. Basis, in turn, has put all of its commercial computing to store customer data and such out into the cloud. They picked Rackspace, very good service. Rackspace got hit with malware. Malware so bad, Rackspace decided it would have to nuke its systems from orbit. And on a Friday night, Rackspace announced it would be rebooting successively around the world every single Rackspace data center, which had Basis scrambling to inform its customers that no customer services, Basis would be down for a period of 36 hours. And Basis has no control over this. In fact, this letter went out from Basis because of a form letter it got from Rackspace. It didn't even get like a call from a customer account liaison, and it's left guessing and now having to imagine conveying, paying forward this outage to its customers. So the code itself can become vulnerable when you're entrusting to a third party, and so too can the content, which is why in version 1 of the Kindle, as Amazon opened up to third-party content, but Amazon takes a cut of it, one publisher made available George Orwell's 1984 for purchase at 99 cents. It's because George Orwell's 1984 was thought to be in the public domain in North America. But the publisher was wrong. It was in the public domain in Canada, still under copyright in the United States. Even a brief glimpse of the law of statutory damages is enough to chill the blood, not only of the publisher, but of Amazon. Talk about deep pockets, direct, contributory infringement. Who knows? You can imagine the crisis conference call they're having at Amazon as they realize they've been selling at potentially $300,000 in damages per copy, a 99-cent copy of 1984. So not only do they stop immediately making it available, but they reach in to every Kindle that had purchased 1984, and they delete 1984 off the Kindle. Can you think of a better book to have this happen to? It's like, you don't have 1984. You never had 1984. There is no such book as 1984. And this is like a shot across the bow. I speak now wearing my librarian hat. I'm actually the librarian at Harvard Law School, thinking about the ephemerality of content that's perfectly ubiquitously available until the moment that it isn't, and then it's suddenly completely gone. But this is deleting the hard drive by analogy. How about transposing the numbers in the spreadsheet? Wouldn't that even be worse, because you might not even know what you're losing? Well, for that we have the Barnes & Noble Nook, where on a particularly quiet weekend I was reading War and Peace and got to this passage. As soon as she heard his voice, a vivid glow nooked in her face. What? They keep reading. When the flame of the sulfur splinters nooked by the tinder burned up. All right, now I use the Nook search functionality to find the word Nook. It's like Googling Google. It's very weird to Nook for Nook. And it's all over Tolstoy. Now, I know Tolstoy was a visionary, but this is weird, right? So what explains this? Every place in War and Peace where the word Kindle appears, it has been replaced by the word Nook. Worst product placement ever. And I think an explanation is a third-party vendor had marketing material on either end of the public domain War and Peace it was making available. And they wanted to make sure they wouldn't offend Barnes & Noble by having Kindle mentioned. So they just did a global search and replace, not realizing what would happen. But to me, this is another example of how fast and loose people can play, companies can play with critical information when they think of the information basically as a commodity. And the commodity, there's going to be a certain number of ants in the rice. That's just called doing business. What's the acceptable number? What's the acceptable number of wrong words, of transpositions, not typos, but actual changes in meaning to information, whatever it might be, to a patient record, to a book that you might read? I think it's different when you think of it as information. So to sort of summarize this section, it's like imagining a toaster. This is a Royal typewriter here. Let's start thinking about, well, what's the next generation toaster going to look like as a dynamic technology, even if it's dynamic only to its vendor rather than to a broad number of Bob Frankstons without any gatekeeping. And the answer is it'd be kind of like a toaster that on Wednesday, there's a sign on it that says, congratulations, there's been the fall update. You now have a third slot. You're like, okay. And on Wednesday night, you come home and it's like, sorry, there was a bug in the rollout. We're back to 2. We apologize for any toast that was crushed. Like, okay. You go down for breakfast on Friday morning and it's making orange juice. And they're like, all right, what did I buy? Did I buy a toaster? No, you didn't buy anything. You have entered into a long-term breakfast-oriented relationship with a service provider. They're trying to help you. They want you, like CompuServe, to keep paying the $10 an hour or whatever it is. But it greatly affects the environment in which we operate and what we can count on as stable within it, unless somehow, by contract or otherwise, we find ourselves insisting upon it. And this, yeah, David.
So, Jonathan, and are toasters just going to become like PCs and the Internet of Things?
Yes, exactly. For which we then say, if the Internet of Things is happening, oh, this is great. You're totally anticipating it. I find myself asking the question for this Internet of Things that we're all just like, all right, bring it on. Let's see what happens. I'm not making it, but I guess I'm toasting it. And the question is, all right, are these things going to talk just to their vendors, right? Ace Hardware, your toast this morning brought to you by the Ace Hardware store. It's just like, I don't care, I just wanted a toaster. Or, like the internet, will they talk to one another? Will there be some interesting piece of code, a trumpet windsock, that will have your trumpet talk to your sock? Or that will have your toaster talk to your television? So that when your toast pops up, your TV flashes a message that says the toast is ready, right? Can we count on True Value deciding that in the feature set? No, they're working on the paperclip. But others might. And so my example really now is like, let's take the most basic object I can think of, no moving parts, a shovel. What does it mean to make a shovel part of the Internet of Things so that the shovel is now somehow talking to the Internet? What's it going to say? You know, we could do a brainstorming session and take quite a long time. So maybe, for example, the kid tells you he shoveled the walk. Shovel tells a different story. All right, that's pretty good. Or maybe as you're shoveling energetically, the shovel's like, you need a break. Or I can summon an ambulance. It's totally up to you. Not a bad kind of airbag sort of technology for the Internet of shovelly things. Or how about the city? We have a cutting edge mayor of Cambridge or Somerville who says, I need to figure out where to deploy my snow plows. Wherever people are shoveling most furiously might be where the most snow is. We'll send the plows to follow the shovels. Or will it be wherever they're given up on shoveling, that's where the plows go? Or we make it a contest. The more you shovel, the more we plow. That could sort of change the dynamic between citizen and state. So all of that awaits with the architecture still to be figured out on those data flows. Where will they go? Who will write the code that connects these Internet of Things objects to one another? And back to basis, back to that watch I was talking about. There's the basis watch that had invested its security in Rackspace. Right? This thing can tell you whether you slept well last night. Because how are you possibly going to know yourself, right? You'll wake up and the watch will be like, I know you feel good, but you slept terribly. You're like, oh, too bad. Or even better, I know you feel terrible, but boy, did you get a good night's sleep. So this watch, individually, I get all the privacy issues and stuff, but let's start thinking about what it would mean to collectively mine that data. How could we collectively get interesting insights so that we might say, for example, oops, I don't know where that slide went. I'm just going to describe it to you. If we just say, is the city of Cleveland particularly nervous tonight? You could answer that question across multiple basis watch bands by saying, yes, on average, Cleveland is palpitating more than it usually does. Oh, I see, there's a big baseball game tomorrow. Or if you're the Egyptian government, you might say, I think I'd better send a few more trucks to Tahrir Square. It looks like people are anticipating something big happening within that 4-block radius. Is that a privacy violation? Oh no, we're only using aggregate data. Is it a free association violation? I don't know. There's no First Amendment in Egypt, so it's hard, particularly there, to say. But you can start to see the ways in which this is recombining in ways. And it's also, that's an example of the threat to security coming from the government rather than coming from shadowy criminal gangs or an opposing government or so-called script kiddies, the people who hack for fun. And that's why when just a couple weeks ago, Apple announced that it had, in the wake of the Snowden revelations and an increased customer concern about security against the government and lawful process, not security against random people, they announced that from now on, your security phone, your security code in your iPhone will encrypt the data in the phone. So if the physical phone gets seized by law enforcement, they're going to have a much harder time without the code, which of course they can try to extract from you, but they don't want to do that. They just want to plug it in and see what's there. Harder to do now. And that has resulted in the FBI and others saying just how terrible that is. And the way he puts it is, once I get the warrant, I want to be able to see what's on the phone. And it's not fair that the phone stops me from doing it and that Apple has nothing to say about it, even though this is just a new capability that the creation of these tethered appliances, tethered to their vendors, had made possible to begin with. And we are seeing a number of firms like Apple now explicitly making a product or service differentiation based on security against lawful process. And I can see you getting questions if you're in this line of work at all, your firm or firms that you're dealing with are and looking for advice. How far can we go in basically making a thumbing of the nose at the reigning sovereign be part of what the device or service is doing? Yahoo recently persuaded the government to allow to be unsealed Yahoo's very protests against, for not law enforcement but foreign intelligence gathering, access to Yahoo data to show that Yahoo was at least fighting it. It was very important to Yahoo to show that. And we even have, first among librarians, this phenomenon of the Warrant Canary, or canary warrant. I guess it's better put as a canary warrant. It's, no, it's a warrant canary. It's a canary that tells you if a warrant has been served, even if the warrant says you are not to tell anybody that we have served the warrant. There are a number of administrative subpoenas, Patriot Act, invocations that can do this. So very early on in the Patriot Act, 2002, a local library wanting to safeguard patron data about who had taken out what books, but aware that it might get hit with a form of administrative subpoena that wouldn't allow it to tell its patrons that it had happened, posted this very sign on the wall. The FBI has not been here. Watch very closely for removal of this sign, wondering doctrinally if telling people that you can't tell anybody about the warrant includes ceasing to tell people that you haven't gotten a warrant, because if it does, it means you are now ordering the library or other recipient to lie. If the recipient is a publicly held company, are you telling them they must materially misrepresent facts that, if known, would be the subject of an 8K, and now there's an AUSA or an FBI agent saying, no, no, you must lie? It actually puts the government into a weird position, even though it is so clearly a parlor trick, right? It's functionally the same, and we know that, you know, a missing half-truth has got to be the same as a lie, and yet this is starting to put the issue of secret warrants on the table. And Apple, again, last November, did their first transparency report. Companies that involve technology that are consumer-facing are more and more putting out transparency reports saying what kind of consumer or, government requests they've been getting for information, for surveillance. And at the very end of the report, they say Apple has never received an order under Section 215 of the Patriot Act. We would expect to challenge such an order if served on us. So they're affirmatively saying we haven't gotten one. Now what happens should they get one? Well, in the most recent Apple transparency report, there was no line in it. So that made news. Here's one of the more florid pieces of news. Apple's Patriot Act detecting Warrant Canary dies. And there's the dead canary to alert the world that it apparently has gotten a Section 215 request. These are the sorts of things that I would probably fold into the rubric of cybersecurity again, thinking of it not as security against third parties, but security against governmental parties under whose jurisdiction the company is. And having a strategy for that, including with these sorts of secret subpoenas and warrants, who gets told? Is it okay for the CTO or an engineer to get a visit from somebody bearing a legitimate badge, handing over the letter demanding that that engineer that can access the files within the company, coughing up the data, do so? Who is that engineer supposed to tell? The letter says you can't tell anybody, perhaps. Should they tell the CEO? Should they tell the CTO? Should they tell the general counsel? Does the board get told? No best practices on this. So far, the number of companies reached by these kinds of letters appears to have either been one-offs, small companies for which there might only be one relevant person to ask, or big companies for which they already have some relationship with the government in compliance or regulatory terms, where that relationship is then used to convey an order like this. But as this becomes more common, it seems to me you will want best practices in place, and the best time to do it is anticipatorily, before you're already having to figure out if even establishing the practice is violating a valid order, or at least an unchallenged one that you've got from the government. All right, in the remaining time, I wanted to shift gears and talk about the social media thing that I mentioned, but I should pause here and see if there are any other thoughts or questions before I do it. And of course, at the end, if we have time, I can take questions about anything, but anything so far? Yes, sir. Yes.
So there seems to be a set of standards that are owning financial institutions.
Yes.
I mean, is there sort of a regulatory framework that they're working under?
I think, yeah, good question. I think what you're identifying is what is becoming a so-called bimodal distribution. So where there are firms that do not exist under specific regulatory gaiuses, not financial, not healthcare. There's a couple stovepipes that already know they're regulated 6 ways from Sunday. Just say HIPAA to the healthcare people and they run screaming. They may well be trying to migrate towards an environment that's not unlike the classified environment in government, where you have two computers even. You have your classified computer for classified email, and you have your regular computer that can surf the internet, and you can't move a USB stick between them. Costly, redundant, but trying to say we have certain crown jewels we do not want to have exposed, and that's a best practice in securing them. So there will be companies that do it, including that have two-factor authentication for email. Many law firms have moved to that, where you've got a little VeriSign key or something. Then, on the other hand, you have a new kind of tidal wave that's really hard to fight against, called bring your own technology. The day of the company issue laptop is waning for many people, or it gets issued and it starts gathering dust. And people want to be able to have their own device and get to stuff on Dropbox. And if the company has an 18-step process to share a file, and there's two people working within the company trying to collaborate on deadline, screw it, I'll put it on Dropbox and then you can download it. And it almost says if you tighten the security too much, you strip the screws and people migrate to the stuff they know and love. Yeah, yeah. Yes. I think it may be easier to do for a law firm than it is for a startup or even for a run-of-the-mill company with a workforce that hasn't been cranked through law school and given some of the risk aversion that we love instilling.
Among the lawyers, it's like, well, we're asking you to work 70 hours a week, so you're spending all of your awake time in the office.
Yes.
They want to be able to do some of their personal things.
Correct.
At the same time.
Correct. So I guess I don't sense an equilibrium yet. I do see certain packages of practices coming from the banks sometimes internally, coming from healthcare, that at least have some aspect of security theater and in some ways increase security. But they come with a real cost of trying to force compliance with it. And if you do get compliance, in actually slowing down your work.
I didn't hear too many banks. I know my competitor, but insurance companies have been quite vocal about it. I'm wondering,
Not that I know of. I've talked to a few. I've consulted with a few. They are wondering about how to make this work. That's my experience, at least, with them. I don't know if others have other experience. Adrian? No, go ahead.
I'm just a little bit, I'm a little concerned. I you brought up the iPhone as an example of something that's sort of going away from what you described.
Yes.
Trend. So, but I was trying to kind of understand that technologically, or what you're anticipating. Are you anticipating more of these closed garden kind of versus?
Yes. I'm anticipating a hybrid. We're not going back to the era of the Royal typewriter or the Flexowriter. There will be some way of changing the nature of the devices and the services we use on the fly, which was sort of the gift of the PC, especially once it was networked. However, those changes might be piped through a single point of approval, like a vendor, or maybe even a government in some other jurisdictions, that greatly affects second-order effects that don't have to do with security, that have to do with regulability, with possibly some salutary effect on security. I don't pretend it doesn't help to have somebody in the middle who can pull 1984 off of every Kindle if there's a problem with it. But just think, next time I'm making a copyright infringement or a defamation action, and I've identified the offending work, and I'm about to get my judgment say, the prior remedy realistically was money damages from the publisher, from the author. A new remedy now is specific performance kind of thing or specific injunction that would go into every book and send a 2-point less defamation. As that becomes a possible remedy, you might see people trying to invoke it. Now there's the Streisand effect. This is what they didn't want you to see. That will circulate around. But there might be other circumstances in which I'll take my chances. This is defaming me. I want it out. And it might become more of a happenstance. So I see it as a hybrid between open and closed. Let me turn now to the social media part of things. This was an original Facebook screen back from 2004 or so. And the original Facebook, the Facebook, was a noun. It was a marquee for people to put their picture, something about them, et cetera, et cetera. Facebook introduced the news feed a couple years later to great controversy. People didn't like the feeling that every time they changed something on their static page, the news feed in turn would capture it and then announce it to everybody else. So-and-so is now single is very different from quietly removing whoever you're dating from your static Facebook page. It also meant that you started to get engines where stuff could go viral. You could like something or share something, and that would go out to others who could in turn share it or like it. And otherwise backwaters of the internet that mucked about and came up with interesting things that might be share-worthy could then have their users share them on something like Facebook. So Reddit is one such place. Reddit started off as a place where people were kind of goofing around. They just come up with funny things to do. One thing would be they would get photos of interesting things and then come up with funny captions to them. So here's a photo of a house that caught on fire. Nobody was hurt or killed. That is one of the denizens of the house. Picture was taken by her father as the fire department tried to douse the flames. That got into the hands of Reddit, which captioned it thusly. It's pretty good, right? That then goes viral and ends up being a book about viral memes, for which here is the same girl a couple years later holding the book written about the photo that became a meme. And places like Reddit are now just not just sources for that, but of basically news and other things happening in the world that it's some moment in time between 2 or 3 people, but that has some human interest element that then can catch viral flame. And we start to see then things happening where everybody thinks it's just local, and it becomes very quickly global. So we end up with, for instance, John Mackey, the co-founder of Whole Foods, who really likes Whole Foods, does not like Oats, one of his competitors, and on a Yahoo message board starts under a pseudonym making fun of Oats. So Rahodeb was his pseudonym. His wife's name is Deborah. And he posted, perhaps the Oats board will wake up and dump their CEO and bring in a visionary and highly competent CEO. Later on, he posted, I like Mackay's haircut. I think he looks cute, writing about himself, of course, until somebody unveils this. And then it goes viral that the CEO of Whole Foods has been posting on message boards under a pseudonym about himself and against his competitors, leading Whole Foods to have to put up an entire frequently asked questions document about its CEO. Who is Rahodeb, and why was the FTC releasing documents in an unrelated inquiry about him? And so now here's his lawyerly vetted statement. I posted on Yahoo under a pseudonym because I had fun doing it. Many people post on bulletin boards using pseudonyms. I never intended any of these to be identified with me. No material information about the firm was leaking out. This was just scurrilous, terrible stuff, but not company secrets or market-moving stuff. That's no proprietary information. Anyway, that's it. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. This was the page that Whole Foods put up. You actually can't find it on the Whole Foods site anymore. If you look for it, this is what you get. They got rid of it. This is the Internet Archives version, where a guy named Brewster decided to crawl the internet and keep everything for the future because it should happen. That's archive.org, incredible resource. My advice, at least to you, if you're giving advice, is don't do this. Don't take down the page and hope the problem goes away. You are no longer the source of record as the company for the very thing you said as the company, leaving it in the hands of others to characterize or mischaracterize what you said. It may be sad, but it happened. You've got to kind of own up to it and permanently park it. Twitter, another great, I don't know, there are a lot of Twitter users among us. Okay, a few. Twitter basically lets you just come up with a list of people who are also on Twitter, who you're interested in hearing what they have to say. They say stuff in 140 characters or fewer, and then your list, whenever you turn into Twitter, is just a time-sequenced list of what the people you're following have to say. It doesn't sound like much if you haven't used it, but it turns out to be an incredible viral engine, and people can tweet at one another, and third parties can then join in on the tweeting and retweet what others tweet. And you end up with things like this. I don't know how many people are Boston area, but if you are, you probably follow involved in the market basket imbroglio of the summer, where Arthur T. and Arthur S. Demoulas were in a grudge fight for who would run Market Basket. People remember this? Yeah, people live this? Good times? Okay, well, this is one of the board members of the privately held Market Basket, and he tweets, back from a Boston board meet, very interesting to be on the other side of protesters. They are much better looking than I remember. All right, a kind of sort of funny thing to say, maybe. This tweet became then centered in the Boston Globe article, Market Basket Director's Tweet Draws Criticism, ... from the Boston Globe. And that's a great example of, is there even a policy within the firm about tweeting by the CEOs, participating perhaps pseudonymously on message boards, or of the directors? And should there be? How restrictive do you want to be? Of course, the more restrictive you are, the more you're making them your agent. Now you're showing some form of attempted control over them, versus saying that's their personal account. They can tweet what they like. If they go really too far, then I guess we might fire them. But otherwise, your problem is with them and not with us. If it's not a board member, maybe it's an employee. Here is a Genius Bar Genius from Apple. Have people had experience at the Apple store with geniuses? There are people who are like, oh, I'm going to help you with your laptop. You're like, okay, but if you're a genius, why are you here? And don't ask that. They'll send you to Oxford for 3 years. So this is a Genius Bar worker who is generally fiercely pro-Apple, and this is a very popular account, over 13,000 followers, but he also tends to tweet pretty nasty things about customers. From all of us to all of you, please clear your goddamn browser history before coming in. Love, every Apple genius ever. I think if I knew how to do it, I wouldn't be seeing you. But if you're Apple, the famously secretive Apple, is this a problem? Is this a problem? This is a guy representing the company in a way, right? He is the face of the company to at least 18,000 people, not counting retweets. Do we have a problem with the fact that he basically answers only to himself on what he's going to say about Apple? Do you do a Holder-esque hunt to find who is the mole in Apple that is daring to tweet about his day job as a genius? Or do you say, you know what? That's just life. I don't know, something to think about. Let me put a few more examples on the table. This from Interactive Corp, Barry Diller's outfit that is known as a huge internet-savvy umbrella. They run About.com, Ask, Urban Spoon, OkCupid. They're all over content production on the internet, which makes it particularly puzzling that their head of public relations, a South African named Justine Sacco, who was about to fly to South Africa, was somehow possessed to tweet the following: "Going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white." Okay, so she tweets this thing, and she doesn't have that many followers, but somebody tweets back at her, "Is that tweet real? You work in PR, you should know better." Retweet. So now his followers see what she just did. Somebody else says, "I remember when you could be utterly stupid without the whole world finding out," referencing her tweet. And this starts to gather momentum. What presents as a just downright completely racist tweet is making the rounds, and it's associated with this company. What is she possibly thinking? And a person with almost no followers is the first to use the hashtag, "Has Justine landed yet?" So now we're going to start following on Twitter. People can converse with this hashtag. She's in the plane with no internet access while this is all blowing up, and truly around the world. Somebody put together a map using a mashup of who's actually using these hashtags. Everybody is talking around the world about, "Has Justine landed yet?" Somebody then says, "I don't think America's watched a landing this closely since Apollo 13. Has Justine landed yet?" All right, now so far this is just individuals. Corporations and nonprofits start to get in. So One, which has an AIDS charity, says, "Learn more about the fight to reach the beginning of AIDS. Hashtag, has Justine landed yet?" Okay for One to do? Is that like just, hey, why not? It's a bandwagon, why not jump on it? The Aid for Africa site, as a result, crashes due to traffic overload. When it comes back up, consider a donation. Do it for Justine. Has Justine landed yet? Okay, AIDS for Africa, very good charity, buys JustineSacco.com and redirects it to its fundraising page. Justine is still in the air while all of this is happening. People are starting to, it is a long flight, people are starting to create fake Justine Sacco parody accounts on Twitter, left and right. IAC, even though their PR person is unavailable, is realizing they have a problem by this time. And so while Justine is still in the air, the offensive comment doesn't reflect the views and values of IAC. We have parted ways with the employee in question. That's it. And we hope that time and action and the forgiving human spirit will not result in the wholesale condemnation of an individual who is otherwise known to be a decent person at core. Underneath all of her awfulness, IAC officially is ready to say there might be some glimmer of hope for her. GoGo, by the way, gets into it. Remember GoGo in flight, internet. Next time you plan to tweet something stupid, make sure you're getting on a GoGo flight, CC Justine Sacco. Okay for GoGo to do this? Yeah? They later apologized. Enough people tweeted back at them that somehow this was not fair to advertise on the basis of this. Not good. Let me give you one more example in the social media space. It was a very serious and quite moving campaign called hashtag Why I Stayed that bubbled up. This was not like anybody organized it, but during the NFL stuff about domestic violence, people started talking about why it's really hard to leave an abusive relationship. It's not as simple as just, well, if you're mistreated, get out. And they would explain in 140 characters or fewer why it was difficult. And they used the hashtag Why I Stayed to do so. So there's somebody who works for DiGiorno Pizza, running the DiGiorno Pizza Twitter presence, which has, I think, about 80,000 followers. And DiGiorno is, you know, edgy and using everything to talk about pizza. And this person just saw Why I Stayed going across the screen, so promptly tweeted on behalf of the company, "Why I Stayed, you had pizza." This is not well received. There's a torrent of condemnation coming at DiGiorno's within about 30 seconds. 2 minutes later, the person operating the account says, "A million apologies, did not read what the hashtag was about before posting. This is in early September. They tweet one more time. There's their page. We heard from many of you, and we know we disappointed you. We understand, and we apologize to everyone for this mistake. This was the last tweet by DiGiorno Pizza for a month. If you visited the page until the 1st of October, all you would see is somehow, is the pizza poisonous? What did we do? That's it. Talk about no best practices. Do you fire the person that did this? What did the person do wrong except, oops, I should have looked a little more carefully, but I was tweeting a mile a minute to be the kind of hip presence that can garner 80,000 people around a supermarket pizza brand. I don't know. I don't know what to do. How do you pipe this up to the head of PR, who hopefully has better judgment, about whether to tweet this? How do you pipe it up to the CEO? Do you report to the board? Hell, do you file an 8K over this? Is it affecting the reputation of the brand? Very weird space when you need to be so fleet, and at the same time, you can face so many reputational risks. Lest I leave you in this conversation with only negative stuff, I should tell you the happy story of Mortons Steakhouse, where a guy named Peter Shankman tweets at them, hey, can you meet me at the Newark airport with a porterhouse when I land in 2 hours? Okay, thanks. They look up Peter Shankman. He is a frequent Mortons customer. They even know what kind of steak and side he likes. So Mortons gets together and actually meets the guy at the airport in a tuxedo with the requested steak. You can see how happy he is. And Consumerist, a website that basically no firm ever wants to be mentioned on, good news even from Consumerists saying how cool this is. And if you look at this wonderful example from Amazon, a genuine chat window, tracking, his shipment is not there, but doesn't know where it is. Amazon says, warmest greetings, my name is Thor. Greetings, can I be Odin? Odin, father, how art thou doing on this here fine day? Thor, my son, agony raises upon my life. Who dares defy the all-father? They get into this entire, choose your own adventure in the Amazon chat window. Now you tell me, is this showing initiative? Is the person at Amazon a genius? Or is this 5 degrees, turn the dial, you say the wrong thing, and now you've got an angry customer? I don't know the answer to it. This turned out very well for Amazon for having rolled with it so much as it happened. I do just know we are entering a world in which it's not just online moments can blow up, but any moment can blow up. This is the announcement of Pope Francis as the next pope in St. Peter's Square, with everybody just waiting to capture the moment. And these are devices that they didn't have to bring for the occasion, which means that any gathering of people at any moment can turn into this in a heartbeat, or maybe even have already turned into it and be passively recording. Think Google Glass, or on the right, Look-See, or something less weird looking that will just be embedded in the next round of prescription frames. And you'll start to see, I think, how almost every interaction, corporate, private, governmental, somebody's going to be in the course of recording. And there will be some good things that come of that and some terrible things as well. And even an attempt, because everything can be a viral moment, to then manufacture those viral moments. I think about a task put out on a micro-labor site to write a positive 5 out of 5 review for a product on a website as if you own it, trying to make that grassroots sense of reviews become AstroTurf. Or in a physical world example, here's Craigslist offering $50 in lunch to somebody who can wear a t-shirt and attend a meeting. Here's what the meeting turned out to be. Everybody shows up. America counts on coal at the meeting, when in fact they are counting on lunch. They don't have a particular view on coal. And it makes you wonder, the next time you see a protest going on, how many there are real protesters versus $50 in a lunch? Does the First Amendment treat them differently? If you really care about what you're doing, you are allowed to stay. But if you're just hired shills, under commercial speech, you've got to go. I don't know the answer, but I see the way in which people express themselves, and society even has its own metric for knowing when there's a problem. You may not agree with the protesters in the street, but there they are. We have a problem. That's a form of feedback that a society needs to respond to. It gets harder and harder to do. And good old Facebook is an example of media that have become so central that when it went down, old media finally broke into its programming to be like, Facebook is down, now you have to watch us, kind of thing. I start to wonder about the uses of something like Facebook, where those news feeds get algorithmically filled in both directions. In one direction, here's somebody who had a terrible experience with Enterprise Rent-A-Car and couldn't get Enterprise to respond in any way, so she took a creative tack. She decided as a user to become a Facebook advertiser. And when you're a Facebook advertiser, you can set all sorts of dials about who you want to receive your Facebook ad. So she decided to target her ad to people near Clayton, Missouri, within 10 miles, which is the corporate headquarters of Enterprise, and people who listed as their employers Enterprise Rent-A-Car. How many people is that? Facebook is already telling her, as the person buying an ad, there are 440 Facebook users that meet that criteria. She's like, great, those are the people I want to reach. And she also did another ad here for Clayton with specific job title: Chief Executive Officer, Vice President, Chief Financial Officer. Why she picked chef, I don't know. But that turned out to be 40 people. And then she put in the Facebook ad something you need to know about how bad Enterprise Rent-A-Car is. If you work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car in one of these titles and you see that on Facebook, tell me you're not going to click on that ad. And so they clicked on the ad, and as she reports, the ad started running on Friday evening. By Saturday morning, we had to stop them because the manager of the branch called offering to reimburse them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the best part. How much did it cost? $10.94, because it's a micro-targeting of ads. That's something new that I think could start to become, especially as there's intermediaries, right? We'll help you with your dispute. They'll go ahead and do it. They'll collect their $50 for the service. And now the company is getting feedback from all angles. Now, I said it was bidirectional. The other direction is this. Amazing experiment in 2010 in the US congressional elections. Facebook actually saw 60 million people visiting that day from North America. And for many of them, they chose to include this at the top of their newsfeed, a house ad from Facebook that says, today is election day. Here are some of your friends who have voted. Click here if you've voted. The researchers didn't put it in front of everybody, and then they went to the relevant municipal records systems to see who in fact did and didn't vote on election day, and calculated a statistically significant uptick in votes being cast by people who had been exposed to this single message at the top of the feed. All right, pretty good if you want to help get the vote out. But now here's the hypothetical. Suppose Mark Zuckerberg favors, I don't know, the Democrat in the next election. So it doesn't take much data crunching to know who's a Democrat and who's not, either because people literally declare their allegiance or because of the types of articles they share or other likes they have. If you like the Big Bang Theory, you're a Republican. Who knew? I don't know why. But imagine only salting the feeds of Democrats with reminders about voting, and you leave unadulterated the feeds of the Republicans. And imagine that the number of extra votes cast as a result are the votes that tilt the election. We have no problem with that because electioneering happens all over the place. People write a check and try to buy votes, not in a corrupt way, but you try to get votes shifted. This is just another form of that. Or no, this is a form of manipulation using a tool that people think are working for them that shouldn't be that way. I don't know the answer to that. If I'm advising Facebook and they just want to know not what should they do, but what are they legally obliged to do, I'd have to get back to them on that. Write them a very careful memo that is ultimately inconclusive, and then charge them a lot of money. Everybody wins. So anyway, we're seeing not only then sort of this bidirectionality taking place and really two faces to the technology. It's part of the hybridization of open and closed. It's trying to make either the best or the worst of both directions. But ultimately, reputationally, in both of the zones I've talked about today, I think it really asks the question within a firm, how much can the face you present to the world differ from the inside face, the true face of the company to itself? As your geniuses are blogging, as people are able to document any interaction with the firm that goes awry, as through a cybersecurity vulnerability, your internal email can be completely leaked to the world, as happened with a firm called HB Gary Federal that defied a group called Anonymous to come and get them, and Anonymous within a day had totally done it and set up on a Russian server a search engine for all of the firm's internal mail from the past 3 years. Like, as that becomes more commonplace, I think the separation between these two sides maybe gets harder and harder to maintain. And that poses a challenge for which the wise counsel of the lawyers, internal and external to the firm, I think, can play a very constructive role in figuring out what they should do next. Thank you very much.